1. After my 17-year marriage ended, I was suddenly a single mother of 5 sons. While they are now adults, these stories are recalled from when they were teenagers. We bought a beautiful and large century home with plenty of room for my brood. It needed a lot of work, but I felt so blessed to have a roof over our heads. I should mention our house was the house that all the boys' friends congregated to. There were rarely nights on weekends and summers that we had less than 6 teenaged occupants. I tell you this to try to make you understand that these stories I'm about to tell are the truth, and corroborated by many people. When we first moved in, everything was nice and quiet for a number of months. Then slowly activity progressed. My sons and I were all having unexplained happenings. They didn't tell me for almost a year because they didn't want to scare me. My first experience was being woken up at around 3 a.m. At first I was in a half-wake, half-sleep mode. What woke me was a very loud noise coming from upstairs. It sounded like the boys were rearranging furniture. Very heavy furniture. Loud scraping so loud that I was sure they were scratching the wood floors. I instantly became furious and marched upstairs, ready to bust some butts. When I got to the top of the stairs, all was quiet and dark. I started opening bedroom doors, only to find all the boys sleeping soundly. I thought, wow, that was a vivid dream. To my chagrin, it happened a couple months later, and became more and more frequent, until it was almost a weekly event. I was speaking about this with my neighbor, and she got a funny look on her face. I asked her what was wrong. She said, "I didn't want to scare you, but when my sister, who's clairvoyant, was over, she looked up at that window, pointing to one of the boys' rooms, and said she has company." I asked her what she saw. She said she saw a man and a woman in old-time clothes staring back at her. At some point, I decided I wanted to share my experiences with my sons. When I did, they all broke out with their own stories. Some of them had been touched, some just heard noises or felt their beds being shaken. Here are a few of the more memorable ones in my mind. We being myself and around 7 to 9 teenagers, filling up every square inch of the living room, were all just visiting and half-watching Family Guy. My youngest decided he was tired and going up to bed. Away he went, only to return a short time later with pale skin and wide eyes. He said he'd gone to his room, closed his bedroom door, and got into the top bunk. That's when he heard the door handle turn, heard the door open and shut again, and then felt someone sit on the bottom bunk. He figured it was his brother and leaned over the bunk and yelled something, trying to scare him. He said he froze. There was no one there. He was completely alone. Hence the wide eyes and pale skin. He truly looked like he'd seen a ghost. One morning I woke up to find my boys and one of their friends all sleeping everywhere in the living room, which was not allowed in our house. I woke my second oldest up and asked what the deal is. He said that they couldn't sleep upstairs because something was opening and closing all the doors all night. He said they'd wake up and prop things in front of the doors to prevent them from slamming, only to be awoken by slamming. He said, "Ma, those ghosts kept moving the stuff we put in front of the doors. We just decided to sleep down here." I couldn't blame them. There are so many stories, but I'll tell just one more story that happened to my sons. My oldest subsequently joined the Marine Corps, and on his month-long furlong after his Iraq tour, he had a very creepy encounter. He said he was laying on his stomach and reading from his laptop when he felt something sit on the bed. He said he looked over and saw an indent of a person sitting there and said out loud, "Fuck ghosts." A second later, he said he was being pushed into the bed. He spoke the name of Jesus and it quickly got off him. My final straw was on Halloween night. I was at the computer in the dining room, home alone. I felt something behind me. I turned and heard my name being said in an awful and sinister growly voice. And then the sound of something large falling down my staircase. It was so loud that I thought I'd find a broken dresser at the bottom, but there was nothing, nowhere. I searched upstairs and outside for the cause of the crash, but nothing. I finally had enough, and decided to have my pastors and the elders of my church come bless my property and my house. There has been no strange activity since that day. I no longer live in that house, but One of my sons has bought it. According to him, the house is still clean. 2. My story begins, promisingly enough, in an old psychiatric hospital. As I no longer live in the area nor work for the same company, I can even tell you where it is. It's called the Crichton, in Dumfries, Scotland. The hospital is made up of a complex of buildings built in the 1870s. Now, you may have a mental image of such a place, but I can assure you it's nothing like you might imagine. Beautiful buildings set in manicured parkland. It even has an imposing church at its heart. The signs of its history are there if you know where to look. The imposing staircase with its beautiful wrought iron guardrails may look pretty, but they're there for a purpose. To stop anyone throwing themselves 40 feet to certain death on the intricately tiled floor below. Hidden rooms that never see daylight. The people who work there probably aren't even aware of these hidden rooms. But they're there. You just need to know where to look. My job was as a security guard. Each night I would drive slowly round the complex for an hour at a time. There are plenty of places someone with ill intent could hide, and it's just me, a 5'2" female armed with only a torch. Prior to me starting, the company had been through 2 guards that hadn't mentioned the fact that they were afraid of the dark, but it never bothered me. It never occurred to me to feel unsafe. Part of my job was to deal with alarm calls. These were usually caused by drafts, moths, flapping curtains, nothing sinister. I would be asked, "Do you get scared going in those old buildings alone?" Well, no, never. It just didn't occur to me to be scared of things that might go bump in the night. It was one of those beautiful midwinter nights just before Christmas. The frost bit, the moon was so bright that it cast shadows around the buildings, and if I went to the furthest end of the complex, where there were no lights, the stars. I think the stars are what I miss the most. Too much light pollution where I live now, but I remember tilting my head back and seeing the constellations and the faint haze of the Milky Way. I was driving around, minding my own business, when I heard an alarm from one of the buildings. Solway House, to be precise. It's one of the oldest buildings on the complex, and the only one that looks rather dark and foreboding. These days it's used as art studios and practice rooms for budding musicians. It's not unknown for this alarm to go off, so I parked up and got the keys out of the back of my van. This would be easy. There was an obvious reason for the alarm. The art class had left the external door wide open. I shut off the alarm and got out my paperwork. As I started to write, I became aware of a loud banging from one of the upper floors. My first thought was that someone was still there. My second thought was, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, it's -4 outside, and this is an art studio. Who's going to break in? An insomniac art critic? Even so, I had to check, so up the stairs I went. I couldn't tell where the banging had come from, as it had stopped. I checked each of the rooms, and no one was there, of course. All was deathly quiet. So I went back downstairs to continue with my paperwork. The banging started again. Louder, it sounded as if furniture was being thrown around. Could there be a window open? Banging in the wind. Nice try. There wasn't a breath of wind, but you tell yourself these things when you're in an old psychiatric hospital, on your own, at the true witching hour. Nothing for it. I would have to go up again. There must be something. The banging was loud. It really did sound like furniture being thrown. Once again I went into the art studio, almost expecting the place to be trashed. But everything was in place. I checked the windows, all locked. I even checked the toilets with their creaky pipes, but there wasn't a sound. I was perplexed. The noise must be coming from somewhere. Now, I am as partial to a good paranormal yarn as the next person, but when you're attending an alarm activation, you're looking for tangible reasons. Companies will try and wriggle out of paying for a call-out as it is. You try putting under reason for activation, shadow people, or soul-sucking demon from the pits of hell. You could go whistle for your money, that's for sure. It's as I'm going downstairs for the second time that I feel it. My skin prickles with cold, clammy, static energy. I could swear there's something behind me, not someone, something that doesn't want me there. Don't let it know you know it's there. Don't let it know you're scared. But what is it exactly? I can't explain, except I know I have felt this before. Many years ago, as I gladly moved out of a house whose negative vibe had drained my life of color. It's a feeling, like a mass of negative energy. That's all it is. That time before, that had felt malevolent. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's the only way I can describe the pure fear I felt. And so I descended the stairs. The feeling kept pace with me. There's only one thing for it. Archangel Michael, defend us in battle. I'm not even a Catholic, but when the chips are down, the prayer to St. Michael the Archangel can be pretty effective. On the final turn of the stairs, the creeping feeling stopped, just like that. I'd like to say I ran out into the night, like a big girly, but I had paperwork to finish. As I did, the banging started again, the sound of furniture crashing to the ground. I finished my paperwork, went to the bottom of the stairs and shouted, "I haven't got all night for your nonsense! I'm going now so you can knock yourself out!" And that was it. I left. Later on, back in the office, I said to one of my colleagues, "Weird thing, I was at an alarm at Solway House." He stopped me. "Ghosts?" "Oh, aye. Solway House is as haunted as fuck. That's where they used to cremate the bodies when patients died." So there you have it. I will say one thing for the ghosts of Solway House. At least they have taste. At least they're haunting a rather beautiful, if forbidding, building. We also had a ghost in the office. Our uninspiring 1950s concrete box of an office. A ghost with no ambition, a ghost that was basically phoning it in. I prefer my ghosts with a bit of class, the sort that choose frostbitten moonlight nights to make themselves known. I'm sure they will still be there, long after I am gone. 3. This happened almost 10 years ago. After breaking up with my fiancée, I moved in with my father and stepmother for a few months. At first I was reluctant. I liked my independence. And well, I mentioned in previous stories, things always happened to me. I'm never really sure if it's me or the environment, but this time it was different. This night I came home from work to a complete semi-empty house. A split-level house a street away from the airport. There is always someone home, monopolizing the bathroom, TV, or my privacy, but today was different. My stepmom was in bed early, my father was at his third shift job, and my brothers were out for the night. Anyone with a large family will understand how it feels walking into this. It was a rarity, godsend. I planned on a quiet night. After all, since moving back in, these nights were few and far between. My first goal of the night was to let the dogs out. No big deal, 3 Yorkies. Half the time they ran around in circles, and back up anyways, but this night 2 of the dogs ran into the living room. I ignored them for a few minutes, lingered behind Lazy. But then the sudden thought of them in the living room made me think otherwise. As I walked into the living room, both dogs were quiet, on the sofa facing a bare wall. I called to them to follow me, but they did not move. One of the dogs was my own, so I immediately thought something was wrong. I called again, but then I instantly heard it. A small growl from both dogs, almost like a vibrating whisper. They seemed to be looking past me, so I turned to see what was behind me. Maybe someone was there I didn't see. The lights were still off, so I immediately leapt towards the wall and hit the switch and saw nothing. I looked behind the sofa near the wall the dogs were facing, and found nothing. I thought to myself, they are dogs, and you're losing it. So I shouted at the dogs, "Stop being weird. Doggy bed, now." After a second now, both dogs jumped down and ran towards their bed. That was weird, I thought, convincing myself it must have been a spider, and thought nothing of it, other than a long shower. I gathered my shower caddy and started my routine, when I heard a knock at the door. Well, a tap, like something hitting the door once. I opened the bathroom door with a sigh, and nothing there, so I thought maybe I'm losing it. I closed the door and heard it again. I opened the door again, and nothing. I listened, and nothing. So I get on with my routine. Just as I'm about to let the water run, I hear a loud thump, louder than the knock, and this time the dogs are losing it. I threw my clothes back on, thinking it's the front door. I hushed the dogs and I walked to the door, but just as I'm about to open it, a fear washed over me. It's difficult to explain, but I felt like I was about to open the door to danger. I walked back to the bathroom to gather my caddy, my dog, and lock myself in my room. As soon as I closed my bedroom door, everything stopped. The fear and dogs barking. I felt secure. I settled on convincing myself I'm just not used to an empty house, and if anything happens, I'm sure my stepmom, who is just below my floor, will call for help. I tried to ignore any crazy explanations, and lay there in the darkness, hoping my thoughts would stop. But within moments after my eyes felt heavy, a loud roar and crash hit my house, and then what felt like a thundered, heavy roll from the living room towards me out the back door while the dogs are losing it. I jumped up, ran towards my bedroom door, only to see my back door slam so hard the small curtain and rod fell off. I immediately looked towards the living room, expecting to see some part of an aeroplane in my living room, but nothing was there. Then I turned to see my stepmom looking at me from the back door window. I attempted to open the door, but had to unlock it. I was confused. That door has a lock that has a key, which has to be turned to open it. So how was anyone supposed to open and slam it? I looked at my paled-faced stepmom, and all she said was who was running down the stairs. I was confused, still am. She told me she heard a loud crash and thought it was one of those small, weak planes. She felt, as she puts it, the house shook. At the time, Southwest Airlines was experiencing equipment malfunctions, dropping tires, baggage, etc. When she opened her back door, someone ran out into the yard. That door has a very heavy slid bolt lock. No way anyone can make a grand escape through that door. We stood there completely dumbfounded and numb at what just happened. A few minutes later, my sister called. She wasn't sure if she was dreaming, but she thought she got a frantic call from my stepmom. My stepmom had no idea what she was talking about. She ran from her bed upstairs and didn't think about calling anyone, let alone 911. The next day, my sister came over, and there in her mobile was my stepmom's number with the timestamp. My stepmom brushed it off as being a truck driving through that caused all the commotion. We never talked about it again after that, and she never jokingly mentioned me being a witch, as do my siblings. As I said before in a previous story, whenever something unusual happens, my family assume it's because I'm a born witch. But regardless of my inheritance, part of me is glad she witnessed a bit of what I have experienced in this house. 4. I lived in a small town in BC for 20 years. I was about 32 years old. A house came up for rent. Really cheap. It was $225 a month. But a murder had recently happened there. Coming from a small town, I had already known about that and what house it was. About 3 to 4 months later, it came up for rent. I jumped on it. The fact that someone was killed there didn't bother me. Cheap rent, fenced yard for my 2 boxers. Right on. I'm a bit morbid. During a get-together with some friends, I got a couple of girls to lay down on the floor, and I taped their bodies like it was a crime scene. Murder weapons taped out. Some of my friends thought I was morbid, but I thought that was funny. A few weeks later, I had another party. Beers, tokes, usual stuff. The girlfriend at the time had bought a Ouija board over. I didn't care, it's just a dumb game. I'd seen the movies about them, and I really like those horrors, but it's not real, I know that. So I have no interest in playing. The girls are playing now. They both reacted as if the planchette was moving. I chugged my beer and walked over to them, grabbed the board off their laps, and started shaking the board so the planchette was bouncing. Then I said, "Now it's moving," and then proceeded to break the board in half, laughing the whole time. I had a corner shelf wall unit I displayed it on so you could see it. Like a broke picture, I guess. Thought it went well with the decor of my place. I had it up there for about a month now. Now here's the kicker. In that month, I lost my job, my transmission fucked up, I slept over at my girlfriend's house one night, the fucking house caught fire. I had to jump out the second-story window since that was the only way to safety. As I'm falling, I thought, I should have hit the ground by now. Wham, I hit. Popped my knee out. I had to catch her 2-year-old boy from the same window, then my girlfriend. The only thing that didn't melt or burn was my work gear. Of course. Right. Now, was that paranormal? Karma? Coincidence, or just plain bad luck? It's been about 15 years since I've even seen a Ouija board. I want to buy one and try the same thing again to see what happens, but my girlfriend won't let me. It's probably a good thing, 'cause I'm a bit leery too. 5. I am an orphan. I lost my mother when I was 14. I have to mention that I have lived a difficult life and I have been abused. This is important to mention because the story is about when I was 16, and starts when my evil aunt guardian pushed me to a suicide, with her abuse and actual words saying to kill myself. So long story short, I tried to just make her happy. Her husband, my uncle, had pills that were sent to him from his native country for his schizophrenia because he couldn't get those pills here. They were very strong. This is what I remember clearly. So I took many of those very strong pills, and the next thing I remember is throwing up while I was feeling like I'm in a dream and fainting. That's it. I wake up in hospital. When I wake up, I find out it's been 10 days. I'm shocked. I understand people who have taken pills for depression might have memory loss the day they take the pills. I have met someone like that. But my stomach has been cleaned and washed. I was taken to the hospital, and I was told that I was taken to the hospital not long after I took the pills and cleansed thoroughly. I was told that after I was cleansed I was fine. Apparently I sat up and had conversations, accepted visitors. I found out about visitors when I went back to school and went to visit my teachers and friends. They were telling me they came and visited me while I was in the hospital, how I looked good, normal, and what I said, what we talked about. But I have no memory of it. The strange thing is, I was being told I was saying things that didn't sound like me. To them, it was me, but not me. I know myself very well. So, how can I be in hospital for 10 days and not have memory of those days? All I know is I have lost 10 days of my life. Whoever had taken over my body surely wasn't me. I have thought about this for a really long time, since then. It's not just years later that one might say my memory has been disrupted. But as soon as I woke up and found out it's been 10 days, it is odd that, to me, those 10 days never existed. I remember clearly the moment I took the pills and woke up in hospital. But 10 missing days are still a mystery. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Subscriber Stories, episode 64. Thank you very much to everybody who sent stories in for use in this video. If you have a story yourself, then please do send it along to kingofthecities@gmail.com. The email can also be found in the description of every video. The only thing I ask is that you mark what type of story it is in the title. It's just easier for me when I'm going through and arranging stories for videos, so that I know what type of stories I can be using. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.